Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Longevity, where you meet the researchers. This is a short form interview series from the Institute for Successful Longevity at Florida State University. I'm your host, Victoria Valko, ISL's outreach assistant, and in each episode, we speak to ISL affiliates to learn more about their work, their perspectives, and the people behind their research, all under 15 minutes. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Joe Watso, assistant professor at FSU and director of the Cardiovascular and Applied Physiology Laboratory. Congratulations and welcome, Dr. Watso, and let's get started.
Yes, thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background, like where you're from, your path to the ISL, and maybe something people might not expect about you?
Sure. So I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and I've sort of went all over as many do in their academic journeys, Texas, Maryland, Delaware, and now here in Florida. Um, Path to the ISL. Once I joined Florida State University, just given the interest that I have with cardiovascular health and aging, it was a very obvious thing to join and be a part of. So it was a very easy thing to join. And as far as things that are people may not expect from me, that one's a little tough to answer because I do live and breathe what we do. So when I read an article about something new that helps your physiology or helps with aging or anti-aging, perhaps, I do try those things out. So I do find it pretty interesting and applicable to my own life.
Mhm. And what first drew you to the field of aging and longevity research? And was there a personal connection or a moment that inspired you?
Yeah, it actually happened when I was in undergrad, Salisbury University, and I was studying exercise physiology. And in one of our first sports nutrition classes, they started talking about the impacts of nutrition beyond, I guess, performance or sports. And I thought that was really interesting that you could manipulate your caloric consumption or manipulate the types of foods that you eat or how often you eat. And all those things can have factors with how you age. So that was what first kind of drew me into it. My mentor at the time was Dr. Scott Mazzetti. And from getting involved with him and some of his research, that really just set the trajectory for me.
Awesome. And I know you have a lot of projects going on, but what is your current research, maybe a favorite project you're working on? And do you mind explaining it in simple terms?
Sure. So right now, our large intervention study is using respiratory muscle training. So it simply uses a device that basically just makes it hard to breathe in or inhale. And what that does is strengthens your diaphragm. And we're trying to use this with people with excess adiposity or excess body fat around their rib cage and torso. And we think that this could help them by making it easier to breathe during exercise. If you've ever gone a period of not being very active and then you try to get back into it, a lot of times you feel out of breath. So this is just one potential remedy for that. So it could be that doing this reduces those feelings of breathlessness and makes it more likely that you're going to go out for a walk or a jog, and ramp that up and make it a little bit more enjoyable.
Mhm. And out of curiosity, do you work with athletes or do you work with maybe like the general public when you have participants or volunteers in your lab?
Yeah, we do a range actually. I've been involved actually in one study with the at the time, it's been broken now, but the world record marathon runner who is 70 years old. So the age group marathon record, he ran a 2:54 marathon at age 70. So we did physiology testing on him in the lab, performance based. We've done studies with ultra endurance athletes that are running through the mountains before and after a 100-mile running race. And we do work with patient populations. I've worked with type 1 diabetes patient, and some of our work is in patients with obesity. So kind of a broad array of people that are athletes, sort of general public, and then also people with specific um, areas of their physiology that might have targets to improve on.
Mhm. Does your work focus on environmental factors like high altitude, low altitude, or maybe even like athletes that are in the water or might be like on a different playing field rather than like a, soccer field?
Um, I guess the exposure to that would be I mentioned the ultra endurance athletes in the running race. So that's kind of a extreme environmental type of research. So those athletes, for example, the first marathon of their 100-mile race was actually in the snow, in knee deep snow. And then in other parts of the race in the valleys, it could be 60, 70, 80 degrees. So it's a pretty wide range of temperatures. But during my postdoctoral fellowship, we actually did some really neat studies in an environmental chamber. So you can think about this as a walk-in freezer, except instead of condensing the air and getting it really cold, we actually add heat to the air. and we can stress people out using exercise heat stress. So we put them on the treadmill, and you can manipulate the temperature and humidity of the chamber to try to figure out how people sweat, how they increase their skin blood flow, and just more generally how people stay cool during exercise.
Mhm. And why does your research matter to you? And maybe why does it matter to the public, or why should the public keep in mind about what you're doing with your projects?
Yeah, so as many people know, age is the leading risk factor for the major causes of death in the United States and worldwide. For us, cardiovascular disease is at the top of the list for leading causes of death. So that's what we focus on primarily. And while obviously once you're born with a certain set of genetics, and those things are pretty limited with what you can modify. So we focus on modifiable factors. So it doesn't matter if you're 30 and perfect health, it doesn't matter if you're 70 with a certain chronic condition. The research that we try to do tries to allow you to do things to intervene into your own life, whether it's through the help of an exercise professional training you or a supplement or a nutritional strategy. So we're just trying to build knowledge based on that. So while of course it can be more applicable to certain populations than others, it should be broadly applicable to everybody with how we think about healthy aging.
Mm. And is there a recent discovery or a part of any project that really excites you? And maybe you could share how you felt when you first made that discovery?
I did. So recently, in the last few years, there's been a couple of books written and a lot of podcasts and a lot of influencers talking about nasal breathing and all the benefits and how it calms your nervous system and improves your heart health. But every time I went to the references sections of those books or checked the podcast notes, there was never any references provided. So in 2023, a group of students in the lab and I designed a study to test that, whether if you come in and you do a set of nasal breathing for 5 minutes, so just breathing in and out through your nose versus breathing through your mouth. And we actually were the first to show that blood pressure is a little bit lower with nasal breathing, and your heart rate variability uh, is an indirect index of how your autonomic nervous system is functioning. And those data told us that the sympathetic nervous system was actually a little bit calmer during the nasal breathing portion. So even though it was as expected, and some people who are involved with yoga and other things and breathing techniques might have expected that, it was really neat to actually generate data and evidence to support a claim.
Mm. That's very interesting. And maybe you could share something you wish people knew or understood about the aging or the science behind it, or anything about longevity and related to the ISL.
Yeah, one I guess broad thing is the quick fixes. I see magazines with 14-day fix or fix your immune system in 10 days or lose 20 pounds in X amount of time with this diet. I think the focus should be more so on sustainable lifestyle changes. And so that means if there's 10 things that you want to implement into your life, don't worry about trying to optimize everything in the first week because that's not going to work for most people. Just work in one thing, see how that goes, work in another thing, see how that goes. And it could be that of those 10 strategies, maybe only 3 or 4 of them work for you, but that's still going to pay a lot of dividends rather than trying to be overextending yourself to try to do things that just don't fit into your lifestyle, whether it's based on cost, time, or other things that are relevant for what you do.
Mm. Are there any parts of your research that you've implemented in your life that you personally kind of change, or now you have different habits after making those discoveries?
Yeah, to some extent. I think I've always used my nose to breathe, sort of, if I'm just sitting around, but I'm a little bit mindful of it, I guess, now. Uh, I have done some research with beetroot juice, which is a supplement derived from beets, and it's one of the best ways to increase your dietary nitrate intake. So I do supplement that every morning. I just get grocery store beetroot juice and drink some of that. So hopefully that's some benefit for me and my cardiovascular system.
Hmm. And do you mind sharing a moment or story when you realized your work was making a difference for older adults in the community?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is specific to older adults, but after the paper we published with the nasal breathing reducing blood pressure, um, I heard from a student that they had a friend that worked at the Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, and they had some nurses there that were working with patients. And I don't know how true this is. I haven't followed up or have any hard evidence, but just secondhand knowledge. Apparently, for when they're checking people's blood pressure, if it's elevated, one of the things that they do is just tell people to relax and breathe through your nose. So uh, as useful or not as it is, I don't know, but it is interesting to see the impact of actual healthcare providers trying to implement something that'll improve patient outcomes. And even if it doesn't improve the patient outcome itself, if it just helps the person be a little bit more comfortable and calm in the clinical setting, I think that's still a net benefit, even if it didn't change blood pressure.
I think that's awesome. And do you mind sharing if you've encountered a surprising myth or misconception in your work and maybe tell us how you work to challenge it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, myth or misconception? I think I would probably just have to kind of go back without a specific example in mind of the quick fixes. The body is smarter than we give it credit for sometimes. So if you change one thing, there's six other pathways or uh, organ systems or reflexes involved to counter-regulate that. So it's unlikely to have one pill is going to solve all your problems. So I think just giving the human body a little bit more credit for what it can do with regulating everything.
Mm. And is there a standout moment or opportunity or even relationship from the ISL that's had a big impact on your work or your career?
Yeah, actually, recently there was a planning grant proposals available, and I applied for that with a colleague, Dr. Kyle Smith, who is an expert in immune function and exercise physiology. And we applied for the grant together, and we got $25,000 towards our work with looking at kidney function, female aging, inflammatory markers, and how that changes with heat stress and dehydration. So that's been really neat to support some of the work that we're doing and trying to build some new lines of research, but also forge the collaboration with Kyle. That's been really enjoyable.
Awesome, and congratulations. So just kind of following up, what advice would you give to students maybe interested in your field or in research-related careers, or even to the field, sorry, the research that might be in aging and longevity?
Yeah, I think the most straightforward advice I would have is just to read and read widely. So there are times where you need to spend a lot of time working through published papers and trying to understand the methods and get into the nitty gritty details. But there's also a lot of benefit sometimes to sort of pulling yourself back a little bit and looking a little bit more broad strokes, different areas, because a lot of times that'll lead to insight and connections that you wouldn't usually make. Because a lot of times people in a specific field, they spend so much time on one problem that if they don't consider some other fields or different ideas, sometimes they get stuck. So that'll help you bring some new good ideas that are fresh to a lab, and then also just be more informed yourself.
Mm. Thank you for that advice. And just to wrap up for fun, what's something non-research related you're passionate about, or what are things that help you unwind outside of work?
Yeah, they're going to sound a little boring, but I do like reading. I guess one area that I really enjoy is sort of finance, and whether it's just personal finance or economics, I do like reading a lot about that stuff. So I, I find that calming. I don't know if anybody else does, but I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. And this actually wraps up our podcast episode. And if you'd like to learn more about the ISL and the research happening here across our network, please feel free to visit our website at isl.fsu.edu. And I'm Victoria Valko. Thank you, Dr. Watso. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next time on Voices of Longevity, where you meet the ISL researchers.